The mystery behind this 1890 photo remained unsolved for years, until one detail revealed the truth. The August heat in Savannah, Georgia was suffocating, even in the shade of the old Victorian house on Liberty Street. Emma Rodriguez wiped sweat from her forehead as she climbed the narrow stairs to her grandmother's attic, carrying empty boxes for the estate sale. Her grandmother, Dorothy Chen, had passed away 3 weeks earlier at 94, leaving behind a house packed with 7 decades of collected memories. Emma had been dreading this task. Sorting through a lifetime felt like saying goodbye all over again. The attic was stifling, dust motes dancing in shafts of light from a single round window. Emma moved carefully between stacks of boxes, old furniture draped in sheets, and trunks that hadn't been opened in years. She found the photograph in a battered leather suitcase tucked behind a Victorian-era wardrobe. The suitcase itself was unremarkable, scuffed brown leather with tarnished brass clasps. But when Emma opened it, she found it contained only one item, a single photograph in an ornate silver frame. Emma lifted it carefully into the light, and her breath caught. The photograph showed 6 people posed in front of a white wooden church. 3 men stood in the back row, wearing expensive Victorian suits with high collars and watch chains. 3 women sat in chairs in the front, dressed in elaborate Sunday dresses with leg-of-mutton sleeves and decorative hats. What made Emma's hands tremble was the composition. The 3 men in the back were white. The 3 women in front were black, and they were posed together as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Emma knew enough history to understand that in 1890, the date carefully inscribed on the frame's bottom edge, this photograph shouldn't exist. In Savannah, in Georgia, in the entire post-Reconstruction South, white people and black people did not pose together for formal portraits. The social order forbade it. The emerging Jim Crow laws criminalized even the suggestion of social equality. Yet here they were, 6 people defying everything their society demanded, standing together in front of a church as if making a statement. The positioning was deliberate. The tallest white man stood in the center, his hand resting on the shoulder of the middle woman seated below him. Another white man had his hand on the shoulder of the woman to the left. The third white man stood slightly apart, but his posture mirrored the others, protective, connected. The 3 women looked directly at the camera with expressions Emma found difficult to read. Not submissive, not defiant, something else. Dignified, resolute, as if they knew exactly what this photograph meant and had chosen to be part of it anyway. Emma noticed all 3 women wore nearly identical dresses, and on each dress, embroidered near the collar, was a small symbol, a circle with a cross inside it, surrounded by what looked like olive branches. She turned the frame over carefully. On the back, someone had glued a small piece of yellowed paper. Written in faded brown ink was a single word in elegant script: Familia, Portuguese for family. Emma sat back, the photograph heavy in her hands. Her grandmother had never mentioned this image, never spoke about her family's history beyond vague references to complicated times. But she had kept this photograph hidden in a locked suitcase for decades. She had protected it, preserved it. Emma looked at the faces again, studying each person carefully. Who were they? How were they connected? And why had they risked everything to document their existence together? She knew uncovering their story would change everything she thought she knew about her own family. Emma brought the photograph downstairs to her grandmother's study, where afternoon light streamed through tall windows. She set up her laptop and positioned 3 desk lamps around the frame, determined to examine every detail. As a genealogist specializing in Southern family histories, Emma had spent years helping clients untangle complicated pasts. She knew how to read the silent language of old photographs, the body language, the clothing choices, the subtle symbols that revealed stories the subjects couldn't speak aloud. She started with the church. The building was distinctive, white clapboard with a simple steeple, Gothic-style windows and double front doors. Emma pulled up historical photographs of Savannah churches from the 1880s and 1890s, comparing architectural details. After 90 minutes, she found it. Mount Olive Baptist Church, established in 1868 on the eastern edge of Savannah. The church had been built by freed slaves immediately after the Civil War and served the black community for over 60 years before being demolished in 1932. Mount Olive had been a black church, which meant the photograph had been taken at a black church, with 3 white men posing alongside 3 black women as if they belonged there together. Through her magnifying glass, Emma examined the women's dresses more carefully. The fabric was expensive, silk with intricate lace trim. These weren't simple work dresses, but formal garments that would have cost significant money. Then Emma noticed something that made her pulse quicken. The embroidered symbol near each woman's collar wasn't just decorative. It was identical on all 3 dresses, positioned in exactly the same place, as if it were a badge of membership. Emma photographed the symbol with her phone and ran it through historical databases. After 20 minutes, she found a match in an academic paper about secret societies in the post-Reconstruction South. The symbol belonged to the Order of Olive, a clandestine organization that operated in coastal Georgia and South Carolina between 1885 and 1910. The organization's purpose was mutual aid and protection. but researchers suggested it had been far more significant, a network of black and white members who worked together to resist Jim Crow laws and maintain connections across the color line. The order operated in absolute secrecy. Members identified each other through subtle symbols and coded language. Discovery meant social ostracism for white members and often violence or death for black members. Emma's hands trembled. The three women weren't just wearing nice dresses, they were wearing the order's symbol openly, captured permanently in this photograph. This wasn't just a portrait, it was a declaration. But who were these 6 people? What had bound them together so tightly that they risked everything to document their connection? Emma turned the photograph over again, looking at the word familia. Not members, not friends, family. She thought about her grandmother, about the decades of silence, about the Portuguese word. Dorothy had always described herself as mixed, but never elaborated. Emma looked at the 3 women again, studying their faces. The woman in the middle had high cheekbones and deep-set eyes. There was something familiar about her face. She needed to know who these people were. And she needed to understand what family truly meant in this context. Because in 1890, Georgia, claiming black and white people as family was more than illegal. It was unthinkable. Emma spent the entire night in her grandmother's study, surrounded by coffee cups and notebooks. By dawn, her eyes burned from staring at census records. But she had found something significant. The 1890 federal census had been mostly destroyed in a fire, which meant Emma had to work backward and forward from surrounding years, piecing together who might have lived in Savannah and attended Mount Olive Baptist Church. She started with the 1880 census, searching for black women who would have been the right age to appear in the 1890 photograph. The search returned hundreds of names, but Emma narrowed it by focusing on the area around Mount Olive. While waiting for church records from the Georgia Historical Society, Emma examined the 3 white men more carefully. Their clothing suggested wealth, expensive suits with silk cravats, gold watch chains, polished shoes. These were men of means and social standing. She pulled up property records for 1890 Savannah, focusing on properties near Mount Olive. One name appeared repeatedly, William Harrison. He owned multiple properties within 3 blocks of the church, including a house on East Broad Street described as a boarding establishment for working women. The 1890 city directory listed him as Harrison, William T., merchant and property owner, residence on Drayton Street. Drayton Street was one of Savannah's most prestigious addresses. Emma found a portrait of Harrison from 1892, a tall man with a distinctive handlebar mustache and intelligent eyes. She compared it to the photograph from her grandmother's attic. The man in the center of the back row, his hand resting on the middle woman's shoulder, was William Harrison. Her email chimed. The church records had arrived. Emma scanned through pages of names. Mount Olive's membership rolls were meticulous, listing names, baptism dates, occupations, and addresses. On page 14 of the 1888 registry, she found it. Hannah Harrison, seamstress, residence, Harrison property, East Broad Street, baptized April 15th, 1888. Sponsor, William Harrison. Hannah Harrison, the same surname as William, and William had sponsored her baptism at a black church. Emma searched the 1900 census and found Hannah Harrison listed as head of household. Race, black. Occupation, dressmaker. Living with her were 3 children, Sarah, age 10, William, age 7, and Dorothy, age 5. Dorothy, her grandmother's name. Emma grabbed her grandmother's birth certificate. Born Dorothy Harrison, May 3, 1930, Savannah, Georgia. Mother, Hannah Rose Harrison. Father, unknown. Hannah Harrison was Emma's great-great-grandmother, the woman in the center of the photograph, and William Harrison, whose hand rested protectively on Hannah's shoulder, whose name she shared, who had sponsored her baptism. Who was he to her? Emma looked at the photograph again. William's hand on Hannah's shoulder wasn't casual. It was tender, protective, the way someone might touch a person they loved. In 1890, Georgia, such a relationship would have been illegal. Yet here they stood, photographed together, linked by name and gesture. Emma needed to understand what had bound these 6 people together. The truth was waiting in property records and birth certificates and the careful documentation of people who had lived impossible lives. Emma arrived at the Chatham County Courthouse when it opened, determined to trace every transaction involving William and Hannah Harrison. If there was a relationship beyond employer and employee, the property records would reveal it. The courthouse archivist, Gloria Martinez, helped Emma navigate the heavy leather-bound deed books. "What exactly are you looking for?" Gloria asked. "Anything involving William Harrison or Hannah Harrison?" Emma said, showing her the photograph. "I'm trying to understand their relationship." Gloria studied the image, her expression shifting to recognition. "That's Mount Olive Baptist. My great-grandfather was baptized there." She looked at Emma with new interest. "This photograph, you know what it represents?" "I'm beginning to," Emma admitted. Hannah was my great-great-grandmother. Gloria nodded slowly. Then you should know. Whatever you find might not fit into neat categories. People found ways to love and protect each other that don't make sense by today's standards. She pulled out deed books from 1885 to 1895. Start here. And Emma, be prepared. Emma spent hours reading through transactions. One entry from March 1887 made her stop completely. Property transfer, East Broad Street Residence and Workshop, from William T. Harrison to Hannah M. Harrison. Consideration, $1 and other valuable considerations. A $1 transfer was a legal fiction. It meant the property was essentially a gift. William had given Hannah a house and workshop, but the deed's language was specific, to Hannah M. Harrison and her heirs in perpetuity. William had ensured Hannah and her future children would always have security. Emma found more transactions. In 1888, William purchased an adjacent lot and transferred it to Hannah the same way. In 1891, he paid for renovations that transformed the workshop into a dressmaking establishment. By 1895, Hannah owned 3 properties in Savannah, all transferred from William. He was protecting her, Emma whispered, making sure she'd be financially independent. Gloria looked up from nearby. Did you find the trust document? What trust document? Gloria flipped through the deed book to 1889. Here, filed 6 months after his wife Elizabeth died. Emma read carefully. William had established a trust fund of $5,000, an enormous sum, with Hannah as primary beneficiary and her children as secondary beneficiaries. The trust was administered by Mount Olive Baptist Church, specifically by Reverend Joshua Perkins. William was ensuring Hannah and her children would never be destitute, no matter what happened to him. Look at the date, Gloria said gently, 6 months after his wife died. And look at this birth record from 1890. Sarah Harrison, born January 15th, 1890. Mother, Hannah Harrison. Father, not listed. But William Harrison had registered the birth himself. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. William had loved Hannah. Whether that love began before or after his wife Elizabeth died, Emma might never know. But the property transfers, the trust fund, his involvement in the children's lives, all pointed to a relationship far beyond employer and employee. In 1890, Georgia, such relationships were illegal. Interracial marriage was forbidden. Children from such unions were illegitimate and could inherit nothing from their white father under law. So William found another way. He gave Hannah property. He established trust funds. He documented his children's births. And he stood beside Hannah at Mount Olive Baptist, a safe space, and had himself photographed as part of her family. Emma drove to Charleston the next morning to meet Dr. Evelyn Foster, a historian who specialized in secret societies of the post-Reconstruction South. Dr. Foster's office was lined with archived documents, old photographs, and maps marking locations throughout coastal Georgia and South Carolina. Your great-great-grandmother was part of something remarkable, Dr. Foster said after Emma explained her discovery. The Order of Olive was more than mutual aid. It was deliberate resistance against the racial hierarchy being constructed during Jim Crow. She pulled out a worn leather journal from a locked cabinet. This belonged to Reverend Joshua Perkins of Mount Olive Baptist Church. He was one of the Order's founders. The entries are coded, but I've spent years deciphering them. Dr. Foster opened to a page dated September 1890, the same month as the photograph. She read aloud. Today we documented our covenant, 6 souls bound by love that society forbids, protected by faith that God sees no color. WH and H, TB and M, AF and R. They asked for a photograph, proof of their existence as families. I agreed, though the danger is immense. Should this image be discovered, we all face ruin or worse. But they deserve to be seen. Their children deserve to know they were born of love, not shame. Emma's heart raced. WH and H, William Harrison and Hannah. Yes, and TB is likely Thomas Brennan, an Irish immigrant who owned a printing business. He employed black workers at equal wages, which made him very unpopular. M would be his partner, Martha. AF is Dr. Andrew Foster, one of the few white doctors treating black patients. R was Rachel, his partner. Partners, Emma repeated. Not servants, not employees. The order protected families that couldn't exist legally, Dr. Foster explained. White men who loved black women, their children who couldn't be acknowledged publicly, and the women who navigated impossible situations with extraordinary courage. The order provided legal protection through property transfers, financial security through hidden trust funds, and social protection through their network. She showed Emma more journal entries documenting baptisms, property transfers, education arrangements for mixed-race children, and elaborate systems for hiding family connections from hostile authorities. The photograph you found wasn't casual, Dr. Foster continued. It was an act of defiance and documentation. These 6 people stood together, allowed themselves to be seen as families, knowing that image could destroy them all if discovered. They trusted Reverend Perkins to keep it safe. Why take such a risk? Emma asked. Because they wanted their children to know the truth. Hannah's children, Martha's children, Rachel's children, they all grew up in a world that said they shouldn't exist, that their fathers couldn't love their mothers, that their families were shameful. This photograph was proof of a different truth, proof of love, dignity, and family. Dr. Foster pulled out more documents, birth records, death certificates, property transfers, spanning decades. The order operated until about 1910, when Jim Crow became too dangerous. Members scattered. Some families moved north, others stayed in the south and hid their connections completely. What happened to the 6 people in the photograph? Emma asked urgently. Dr. Foster's expression grew somber. That's where the story becomes difficult. I've traced some of them, but the records become deliberately obscure after 1895. People learned to hide in plain sight, but I can tell you what I found. She opened a folder containing newspaper clippings, death certificates, and handwritten notes. Let's start with your great-great-grandmother Hannah and William Harrison. Dr. Foster spread documents across her desk, creating a timeline of William and Hannah's lives. Emma leaned forward, hungry for every detail about her ancestors. William Harrison was born in 1847 to a prominent Savannah family, Dr. Foster began. He married Elizabeth Whitmore in 1870, a strategic alliance between wealthy families. They had no children, which was noted in society columns as unfortunate. She showed Emma a newspaper clipping from 1885. A society page mentioning Elizabeth Harrison's generous support of charitable works among the colored population, which some found excessive and peculiar. Elizabeth was sympathetic to racial equality, Dr. Foster explained. Some historians believe she introduced William to the order's ideas. When she died in 1889 during childbirth, the baby didn't survive. William was devastated. The birth had been kept very quiet. Emma absorbed this carefully. Do you think the baby might have been mixed race? It's possible. Elizabeth may have been protecting a child that wasn't biologically hers, or there may have been other circumstances. The records are deliberately vague, but 6 months after her death, William established the trust fund for Hannah. Dr. Foster pulled out more documents. Hannah appears in records starting in 1887 when William purchased the East Broad Street property. Before that, she's listed in the 1880 census as a domestic servant in another household. She was 18, unmarried, and already working as a seamstress. How did she and William meet? Reverend Perkins's journal suggests Elizabeth Harrison hired Hannah to make clothing for charitable donations. Elizabeth brought Hannah to Mount Olive to be baptized, and William attended as sponsor. The journal entry from that day notes, W.H. looks at H as a man transformed. God help them both. Emma felt tears sting her eyes. They fell in love. It appears so. But acting on that love was extraordinarily dangerous. The journal documents their struggle. William's guilt over his wife, Hannah's fear of being seen as a mistress, both of them terrified of the consequences. Dr. Foster showed Emma an entry from 1888. W.H. came to me in agony. He loves 2 women, his wife whom duty binds him to, and H. whom his heart binds him to. I counseled patience and prayer. E. knows, I think. She is not blind to her husband's heart nor cruel about it. Elizabeth knew? Emma asked, shocked. The journal suggests Elizabeth was dying. Consumption, likely, and she made a choice to protect the woman her husband loved and the children who might come. She encouraged William to secure Hannah's future. The property transfers began while Elizabeth was still alive. Yes, Emma tried to imagine the complexity of emotions. A dying woman ensuring her husband's love would be protected, a man torn between duty and desire, a young woman navigating impossible circumstances. After Elizabeth died, William and Hannah's relationship became more open within the order's protection, but absolutely secret to the outside world. Hannah lived on East Broad Street. William maintained his Drayton Street residence. They never married legally, couldn't, but Reverend Perkins performed a private blessing ceremony in 1890, witnessed only by order members. The photograph, Emma said suddenly. It was taken right after that ceremony, wasn't it? Dr. Foster nodded. September 1890, according to Perkins's journal. All 3 couples had their unions blessed on the same day. William and Hannah, Thomas and Martha, Andrew and Rachel. The photograph documented all 6 of them together as families, blessed by God if not by law. She pulled out birth records. Hannah had 3 children, Sarah in 1890, William Jr. in 1893, and Dorothy in 1895. William Sr. registered all 3 births, provided for them financially, and visited regularly, though never publicly acknowledged them as his children. That must have been painful, Emma said quietly, for Hannah and for the children. Undoubtedly. But Hannah built a remarkable life despite the constraints. She became one of Savannah's most successful dressmakers, serving both black and white clients. She owned property. She educated her children. And she did all of this while maintaining absolute discretion about William's involvement. Dr. Foster's expression grew sad. But discretion wasn't enough to protect them forever? Dr. Foster pulled out a newspaper clipping from March 1897. The headline stark, "Prominent Merchant Under Investigation for Improper Relations." Emma read the article with growing dread. An anonymous complaint had been filed with Savannah authorities claiming William Harrison maintained an inappropriate and illegal relationship with a colored woman and had fathered illegitimate mulatto children. The complaint demanded investigation and prosecution under Georgia's anti-miscegenation laws. "Who filed the complaint?" Emma asked. "The article doesn't say, but Reverend Perkins's journal identifies the source. Charles Whitmore, Elizabeth Harrison's brother. He had been furious about the property transfers to Hannah and believed William had betrayed his sister's memory. He wanted William ruined." Dr. Foster showed Emma more journal entries documenting the crisis. The order mobilized immediately. Reverend Perkins and other members provided testimony that Hannah was simply William's tenant and employee, that the property transfers were charitable acts, and that any relationship was purely professional. "Hannah was coached to deny any romantic involvement," Dr. Foster explained. She testified that she was a widow, which was a lie, and that her children's father had died before they were born. William testified he was simply a benefactor to a hardworking woman trying to support her family. The investigation lasted 3 months. Authorities examined property records, interviewed neighbors, and searched for any evidence of illegal cohabitation or public acknowledgement of paternity. The order's discretion saved them, Dr. Foster said. William and Hannah had never lived together. He had never publicly claimed the children. There were no letters, no documented visits, no witnesses willing to testify to anything beyond professional interaction. The case was eventually dismissed for lack of evidence, but the damage was done. Emma read through more newspaper clippings documenting the social fallout. William was ostracized by Savannah's elite. His business suffered. Former friends refused to acknowledge him in public. A journal entry from May 1897 captured William's anguish. "I have lost everything, my reputation, my social standing, my business, but I would lose it all again rather than deny H and our children. Society calls our love a crime. I call it the only honest thing I have ever done." "What happened next?" Emma asked, though she dreaded the answer. William sold most of his properties and moved to Charleston in 1898. He established a new business there, away from Savannah's judgment, but he ensured Hannah retained all the properties he had transferred to her. The trust fund remained intact, administered by Reverend Perkins. Dr. Foster showed Emma correspondence between William and Reverend Perkins from 1898 to 1904. William sent money regularly, asked about the children's welfare, and expressed constant longing to see his family. One letter from 1900 broke Emma's heart. "My son William is now 7 years old, and I have never held him. Sarah is 10, Dorothy 5, and I have watched them grow only through your letters and the brief glimpses I can steal when I visit Savannah on business. This is the price of love across the color line. To be a father in secret, to love from a distance, to give everything except my presence." "Did he ever see them again?" Emma asked through tears. "Yes, but rarely. Reverend Perkins' journal documents a few visits, always discreet, always brief, always painful. Hannah never remarried. She dedicated herself to her children and her business, building security and respect within Savannah's black community." Dr. Foster pulled out a death certificate. William died in Charleston in 1904 of heart failure. He was 57. His will left everything to Hannah and their children, though he couldn't name them directly. The will referred to beneficiaries identified in documents held by Reverend J. Perkins of Mount Olive Baptist Church, Savannah. Did Hannah get the inheritance? She did, though it required careful legal maneuvering by the order to ensure white authorities didn't challenge it. The money allowed Hannah to expand her business and secure her children's futures. Dr. Foster showed Emma one final document, a letter from Hannah to Reverend Perkins, written in 1905. "William gave me everything he could within the constraints society imposed. He gave me property, security, education for our children, and love that refused to bow to fear. I will spend the rest of my life ensuring our children know they were born of love, not shame, and that their father was a man of courage." So Emma wiped her eyes, overwhelmed by the tragedy and beauty of their story. Dr. Foster gave Emma time to compose herself before continuing. The other two couples in the photograph faced similar challenges, though their stories unfolded differently. She pulled out documents related to Thomas Brennan and Martha. Thomas was an Irish immigrant who arrived in Savannah in 1882. He established a printing business and became known for his progressive politics. He employed black workers, paid fair wages, and published materials supporting racial equality. Martha was a schoolteacher in the black community, educated and articulate. They met through the order and fell in love. Unlike William and Hannah, Thomas was never married to a white woman. He and Martha were able to be somewhat more open about their relationship, though still not legally married. Dr. Foster showed Emma census records listing Thomas and Martha living at the same address, but in separate entries to avoid suspicion. They had 4 children between 1888 and 1896. Thomas registered their births using a legal fiction, claiming Martha was his housekeeper and the children were from a previous relationship. What happened to them? Thomas faced constant harassment from white supremacist groups. His business was vandalized multiple times. In 1899, the harassment became violent. His printing shop was burned down and Thomas was beaten severely by a mob. Emma gasped. Did he survive? Barely. The order helped Thomas, Martha, and their children flee to Philadelphia in 1900. Thomas never fully recovered from his injuries and died in 1906. But Martha lived until 1942. She became a teacher in Philadelphia and ensured all 4 children received university educations. Dr. Foster's expression softened. Martha's story has a beautiful ending. In 1910, she married a black minister named James. They were married for 30 years, and by all accounts, she was deeply happy. Her children from Thomas thrived. One became a doctor, one a lawyer, one a teacher, and one a minister. And the third couple, Dr. Andrew Foster and Rachel? Their story is perhaps the most tragic. Dr. Foster pulled out more documents. Andrew Foster was a physician from a prominent Charleston family. He came to Savannah in 1887 and began treating black patients when no other white doctors would. He met Rachel through his medical practice. She was a midwife, skilled and respected in the black community. They fell in love and had twin daughters in 1889. Andrew tried to balance his medical practice with his secret family, but the pressure was immense. In 1896, Rachel became seriously ill. Tuberculosis. Andrew treated her personally, but the disease was advanced. Dr. Foster showed Emma a death certificate. Rachel died in 1897, age 32. Andrew was devastated. His journal, which his descendants donated to our archives, documents his grief and guilt. He believed the stress of their impossible situation had weakened Rachel's health. What happened to the twin daughters? Andrew made an extraordinary choice. He publicly adopted them, claiming they were orphans whose dying mother had asked him to care for them. He raised them as his daughters, educated them, provided for them, and eventually helped them move to Boston, where they could live with more freedom. Dr. Foster showed Emma photographs from the early 1900s, Dr. Foster with 2 young women who bore Rachel's features. He never remarried. He spent the rest of his life providing medical care to Savannah's black community and supporting the order's work. He died in 1918 during the influenza epidemic, contracted while treating patients. Emma looked at the original photograph again, seeing the 6 people with new understanding. 3 couples who had loved across the color line, who had created families society said shouldn't exist, who had sacrificed and suffered and survived. What happened to the Order of Olive? Emma asked. It dissolved gradually between 1905 and 1910. Jim Crow became too dangerous. Too many members were being discovered and punished. But the Order's legacy continued through the families it protected and the children it helped survive. Dr. Foster smiled gently. Your grandmother, Dorothy, was one of those children. Dr. Foster opened a new folder containing documents about Emma's grandmother. Dorothy Harrison grew up knowing her father was white, but never knowing his name. Hannah protected her children by keeping William's identity secret, even from them. Emma listened as Dr. Foster outlined Dorothy's childhood, raised by Hannah in Savannah, educated in black schools, trained as a seamstress like her mother. The property Hannah owned provided security, but Dorothy grew up with questions about her father that Hannah refused to answer. In the 1940 census, Dorothy is listed as living with her mother, working as a dressmaker. She was 20 years old, unmarried, and by all accounts restless. Many mixed-race people moved north during the Great Migration, seeking more freedom. Dorothy was considering it. Then she met your grandfather, Dr. Foster said, pulling out a marriage certificate from 1952. Roberto Chen, a Chinese-Mexican immigrant who worked as a merchant in Savannah's small Asian community. Emma had known her grandfather came from Mexico, but she hadn't known the details. How did they meet? Through business connections. Roberto needed custom clothing for his store, and Dorothy was one of the best seamstresses in Savannah. They fell in love despite cultural barriers. Roberto's family disapproved of him marrying a black woman. Dorothy's family worried about her marrying outside their community. But they married anyway, Emma said. They did. And they faced discrimination from all sides. White society rejected them. Black society was suspicious, and Asian communities were unwelcoming. So they created their own world. Roberto's store became a gathering place for other mixed couples and families who didn't fit anywhere else. Dr. Foster showed Emma photographs of Dorothy and Roberto from the 1950s and 1960s, a beautiful couple who looked genuinely happy despite the world's hostility. Dorothy never told Roberto about William Harrison, Dr. Foster said gently. She kept her mother's secret, protecting a father she had never really known, but she kept the photograph. She understood its significance even if she didn't know all the details. When did she learn the truth? Emma asked. Possibly never. Hannah died in 1960, taking many secrets to her grave. But I found something in Reverend Perkins' papers that might have reached Dorothy eventually. Dr. Foster pulled out a sealed envelope. This was in the Order's archives with instructions that it should be given to Dorothy Harrison after Hannah's death. But Reverend Perkins had died in 1903, and his successor didn't understand the significance. The envelope was never delivered. What's in it? Emma whispered. A letter from William Harrison, written in 1903, 1 year before his death. He intended it for his children, but asked that it only be given to them after Hannah's death, so she could decide if they should read it. Dr. Foster handed Emma the envelope carefully. I think you should read it. You're Dorothy's granddaughter. This is your family story, too. Emma opened the envelope with trembling hands and unfolded the yellowed letter. William Harrison's handwriting was elegant and precise. To my beloved children, Sarah, William, and Dorothy. If you are reading this, your mother Hannah has passed, and I have long preceded her. I write this knowing I may never have the courage to give it to you, knowing you may never learn the truth of who your father was, but you deserve to know that you were born of love. I loved your mother from the moment I met her, though society told me such love was impossible. We created a family that could not exist legally, but existed nonetheless in our hearts and in God's eyes. I could not give you my name publicly, could not acknowledge you as my children where the world could see, but every day of my life I was proud to be your father. I am sorry for the pain my cowardice caused you. I am sorry I could not stand beside you openly, could not protect you from a world that judged you for the circumstances of your birth. I hope the security I provided, the properties, the trust fund, the education, offered some compensation for my absence. Know that you are not illegitimate in any sense that matters. You are loved. You are worthy. You are the best thing I ever did in my life. And when I die, I will die hoping that someday the world will change enough that love like ours will not require such secrecy and sacrifice. Your father, William Harrison. Emma read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Her great-great-grandmother Hannah had died in 1960. Dorothy would have been 30 years old enough to understand, old enough to know her father's name and his love. But she had never received this letter. My grandmother died not knowing, Emma said through tears. She never knew her father's name, never knew he loved her. Dr. Foster squeezed Emma's hand gently. But you know now, and you can tell her story. You can ensure that William and Hannah's love and the love of all the families in that photograph is finally recognized. Emma looked at the photograph again. 6 people standing together in defiance of everything their world demanded. 3 couples who had loved impossibly, suffered immensely, and created families that survived despite everything. And one of those families had led to Emma herself. 3 months after discovering the photograph, Emma stood in a small gallery space at the Savannah History Museum, preparing for an exhibition she had spent weeks organizing. Families in Defiance, The Order of Olive, and Love Across the Color Line. The centerpiece was the photograph from her grandmother's attic, now professionally conserved and displayed with full documentation of each person's identity. William Harrison and Hannah, Thomas Brennan and Martha, Dr. Andrew Foster and Rachel. Beside it, Emma had arranged Dr. Foster's research, Reverend Perkins' journal entries, property deeds, birth certificates, and William's letter to his children. Each artifact told part of the story of families who had loved across the color line in one of the most dangerous times and places in American history. Emma had invited descendants of all 3 couples. Some had known fragments of their family stories. Others were discovering the truth for the first time. A woman in her 60s approached Emma nervously. I'm Patricia Chen, Dorothy's daughter. Your aunt. Emma embraced her, surprised and delighted. I didn't know Grandma Dorothy had other children besides my father. She had 3 of us, Patricia said. But we were estranged from your father's side of the family. I saw a news article about this exhibition and knew I had to come. She looked at the photograph with tears in her eyes. Mama never talked about her father. She always said she didn't know who he was. But I think she suspected more than she let on. Patricia pulled out a small wooden box from her bag. After Mama died in 2022, I found this hidden in her closet. I think she'd want it to be part of this story. Inside the box was a silver pocket watch engraved with the initials WH in a single photograph. William Harrison, in his later years, looking directly at the camera with the same intense expression he wore in the 1890 photograph. Mama kept this her whole life, Patricia whispered. She must have gotten it somehow, must have known something, but she never told us. Emma added the pocket watch and photograph to the exhibition, understanding that Dorothy had carried her father's memory even without knowing his full story. Throughout the afternoon, other descendants arrived. Thomas and Martha's great-grandchildren from Philadelphia, Dr. Foster and Rachel's great-great-grandchildren from Boston. Each family brought artifacts, stories, and pieces of the puzzle Emma had been assembling. Together, they created a fuller picture of the Order of Olive and the families it protected. More than 30 interracial couples had been documented, their children educated and protected, their love validated even when the law denied it. An older black woman named Grace approached the photograph late in the afternoon. "My grandmother was baptized at Mount Olive Baptist," she said quietly. "She used to tell me stories about special families the church protected. She said there was a photograph somewhere that proved they existed, but I never saw it until now." She studied the image carefully. These people were so brave. They knew what they risked: violence, imprisonment, death. But they loved anyway. They created families anyway. They stood together and said, "We exist, we matter, we are family," even when the whole world said they weren't. Emma nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "That's exactly what they did. And because they were brave enough to document it, because my grandmother protected this photograph for decades, we can finally tell their story." As the sun set, Emma stood alone in the gallery looking at the photograph one final time. She thought about Hannah, raising 3 children alone while loving a man she could never publicly acknowledge. About William, providing for his family from a distance while aching to be present. About Dorothy, growing up with questions no one would answer, but keeping her father's pocket watch as a talisman of hope. Emma thought about her own mixed heritage, Mexican, Chinese, black, and white, and how it reflected generations of people who had loved across boundaries, who had created families that weren't supposed to exist. The detail that had revealed the truth wasn't dramatic. It was simply the embroidered symbol on 3 women's dresses, a circle with a cross surrounded by olive branches, the symbol of an organization dedicated to peace, reconciliation, and protection. That small detail had led Emma through property records and census data, through journals and letters, through 134 years of silence and secrets, until she finally understood who her family was and what they had sacrificed. The photograph no longer held a mystery. It held the truth, that love was possible even in impossible times, that families existed even when society denied them, and that courage meant standing together and allowing yourself to be seen no matter the cost. Emma locked the gallery that evening, leaving the photograph on display where visitors could see it the next day and the days after, where Hannah and William, Thomas and Martha, Andrew and Rachel could finally be recognized as what they had always been, families who loved each other and refused to be erased. 6 people standing together in 1890, declaring their existence, and now, 134 years later, finally being seen.